Shalom. Welcome again. This is Rabbi Abraham Fisher, and this is Parsha Highlights and Insights. This week's Parsha is Parashat Vayetze. And so let's take a look at an outline of this Parasha. One of the special things about this Parasha is that if you look at it in the Sefer Torah, it all seems to be one long, uninterrupted parasha with no special spaces to indicate the division between subsections. And that's because, I would say, this entire parasha takes place in one particular context. Yaakov away from home. His many years away from home before he begins the journey back. Remember that Yaakov left home, his city where he was living, Beersheba, primarily for two reasons. One, because his brother Esav had vowed to kill him. The other reason is because he is unmarried, and it's important for him to find a wife, but not a wife from among the idolatrous women of Canaan, but rather to go back to his family, to his extended family, and see if he can find someone from within the family to marry. His mother, Rivka, has a brother there named Lavan, and reportedly, Lavan has daughters, so he may be able to find a wife from among Lavan's daughters. So Yaakov leaves Beersheba at the command of his mother and his father, going towards Haran. Along the way, he stops to sleep. He has very little with him. He takes some stones from the area in order to protect himself, and he has a dream. And in this dream, he sees a vision of a ladder that goes up to the heavens, with angels ascending to the heavens and descending. And in the midst of that dream, Hashem speaks to him. It's the first time the Torah records Yaakov receiving prophecy. It may have happened before, but this is the first time the Torah records it for posterity. And Hashem has a few important things to say to him. It says that the land that you're lying on, I will give to you. All of this is your land. Furthermore, your descendants will be numerous. And that means that Yaakov is the third link in the chain that creates the Avot, the patriarchs, because this is exactly the blessing that Hashem had given to Abraham. Yitzchak received it, and now Yaakov is receiving it. Yaakov received this blessing from his father, from Yitzchak, but now Hashem is, in a sense, confirming it. Hashem also assures Yaakov, I will protect you and return you to this land. And so Yaakov wakes up. At first, he is distressed that he fell asleep in a place that seems to be a holy place. He would not have slept if he knew that. But he takes the stone that he had at his head and he anoints it as a pillar, something dedicated to Hashem, a place where people can worship Hashem and he can teach about Hashem. And he also renames the place, which was originally called Luz, and now he calls it Bethel, House of God. And he makes an oath. He says that when Hashem fulfills everything that he says he will fulfill and makes it possible for me to return safely to this place, I will dedicate this place as a house of Hashem, and I will tithe from everything that I have and dedicate it to you. The place is called Bethel. And then Yaakov continues on his journey, traveling towards the house of Lavan, the city of Lavan. And when he comes to the city, the first thing he encounters is a well with shepherds and flock gathered around the well. The well is protected with a large stone, and Yaakov interacts with the shepherds, and he essentially says to them, you're doing something that is not proper. It's still early enough in the day to give your flocks water. They're there, they're expecting to receive the water, so give them the water and then take them back out to graze for the rest of the day because there is still time. They explained to him, however, that this is not possible. The well is covered by a stone, and the stone is so massive that it can only be rolled away when all of the shepherds of the area have gathered together to roll it away. In the meanwhile, he also asks about Lavan, and they say that Lavan lives near here. They do know who he is, and his daughter Rachel is coming with Lavan's flock. She tends Lavan's flock. In the meanwhile, Rachel arrives, and Rachel is a member of Yaakov's family. He's the daughter of his uncle Lavan. She's his cousin. When he sees her, he's able to roll away by himself that stone which normally would have required all of the local shepherds to roll it away. And he also waters the flock. He then cries. And there are a few reasons for him crying, one of which is that he recognizes someone from his family. He's relieved that he's finally found the place that he is supposed to be. And he tells Rachel who he is, how he is related to her. And Rachel, of course, thinks that it would be proper for him to go to her father's house. And so Yaakov comes to the house of Lavan. And Lavan greets him very, very generously. Of course, we find out that Lavan is interested in money. Lavan's main concern is money. And it's very possible, this is the way Rashi puts it, that the only reason why Yaakov receives such an effusive greeting from Lavan is examining Yaakov for concealed money and jewels. But the thing is that Yaakov really has arrived with nothing. After staying for a little while, Yaakov and Lavan talk about what will happen in the future, how Yaakov will continue to live there. Lavan says to Yaakov, "Well, I want you to tell me what will your salary be? You work for me. What do you want?" Now, Rachel is one of Lavan's two daughters. Rachel is the younger of the two daughters, the other daughter being Leah. And Yaakov is in love with Rachel, and he wants to marry her. And so he offers to work for Lavan for a period of 7 years, after which time he will marry Rachel, Lavan's younger daughter. And Lavan seems to agree to this arrangement. When the 7 years are over, and Yaakov says, "It is time for me to marry Rachel," Lavan makes a great feast, inviting many people. He also takes his one of his maidservants, named Zilpah, and gives her as a kind of a wedding present. But secretly, Lavan has switched Leah for Rachel, so that when Yaakov goes into his tent to spend the night with his new wife, it is not with Rachel, but rather with Leah. And when Yaakov wakes up in the morning, he realizes that he is married not to Rachel, as he had worked for 7 years, but to Leah. When Yaakov confronts Lavan with this, and we're going to look at these psukim a little bit later on, Yaakov says, I worked for 7 years to marry Rachel. Why have you deceived me? And Lavan says, well, in this part of the world, we do not allow the younger child to get married before the older one, which, by the way, is something that Lavan could have said to Yaakov for the past 7 years, but he didn't. He goes on to say, wait until the end of the week of celebration for your marriage to Leah, and then you may marry Rachel, but you must commit to me that you will work for another 7 years per wife. And so Yaakov waits till the end of the week. He marries Rachel. Yaakov is married to 2 wives. Lavan gives Rachel her own maidservant as a wedding present, Bilhah. Both Zilpah and Bilhah had been maidservants to Lavan, but he gives them to his daughters as a wedding present. And Yaakov begins to work for another 7 years. He starts off being married to 2 women, to 2 sisters, which is bound to cause some tension. And we then enter into the section of the Parsha about the birth of Yaakov's children, all but one of his children. The youngest of his children, Binyamin, will be born later on. All of the other children are born here. Rachel is barren, but because Leah is the less loved, let us say, of the 2 wives, so Hashem makes it possible for her to have children immediately. And so, one after the other, she has 4 sons. Firstborn is Reuven, then Shimon, then Levi, and then Yehuda. And in the case of each one of these names, Leah explains the meaning of the name. Reuven, see a son. Shimon, God has heard. Levi, my husband will be attached to me. Yehuda, I give thanks to Hashem. With each one of these children, Leah seems to hope more and more that Yaakov will show love and affection for her as well. But Yaakov really wanted to marry Rachel. Rachel still doesn't have any children, and Rachel confronts Yaakov and says that you must give me children, otherwise, what purpose is there in my living? Yaakov reprimands her for this way of speaking. Says it's not up to me, it's up to Hashem. But Rachel says, well, take my maidservant Bilhah and have a child, or have children with her, and perhaps I will be built up through her, very similar to what happened before, previous generation, with Sarah, where Sarah gave her maidservant, Hagar, to Avram. So Rachel gives her maidservant Bilhah as a wife to Yaakov, and Yaakov has 2 children with Bilhah, Dan and Naphtali. Rachel is the one who names both of them. Dan means God has judged me, and Naphtali means wrestling. I have wrestled mightily with my sister, competition between the 2 sisters for the affection of Yaakov. Leah has stopped having children after having 4 children in a row, and so she gives her maidservant Zilpah to Yaakov, and Zilpah has 2 children, Gad and Asher. Both of these words mean good fortune, happiness, And Leah is naming them in order to express her happiness at being able to provide so many children to Yaakov. And let's not forget, this is building the Jewish people, and each one of these children will be a tribe. After these children are born, we have kind of an interlude or an incident. Ruvain, the oldest of the children, but who must at this time must be just a few years old, is out in the field and he discovers something called dudaim. Dudaim is usually understood as some kind of a flower, and it's very beautiful. They grow wild, and they are reportedly have some attractive abilities. So Ruvain brings these dudaim home to his mother, to Leah. But when Rachel sees this, Rachel says, "Give me some of your sons' dudaim." And Leah has words with him. Basically says, "Isn't it bad enough that you've taken my husband? You want my son's dudaim as well?" And Rachel offers um, to switch nights. Yaakov, married to now four women, goes to a different tent each night. Rachel says that tonight is supposed to be my night. So in exchange for these dudaim, you can have my night. And so it is. When Yaakov comes in from the field, Leah meets him and tells him there's been a change of plans and you're coming to my tent. I have hired you for the evening. And then we have the rest of Leah's children as a result of Yaakov going back to her. The first of the children of these last children is Yisachar, which is based on the word for reward or hire. I have hired you. Zevulun, which is based on the idea of a home, that I've provided a home, or Hashem has provided me for a home. And then finally, she has one daughter, and her name is Dinah. Again, God has judged. Finally, at long last, after many years, Rachel herself has a child and calls him Yosef, and she explains the basis of this name on two levels. God has gathered, Asaph is gathered in my shame, and also Yosef, he will add to me one other child. It seems that the Imahot knew that there were going to be 12 tribes, and there is one tribe yet to be born. Rachel uh, prays that one tribe, that one last tribe, come from her. Now, after the birth of Yosef, it seems that the second set of 7 years is over. And so the time comes for Yaakov to leave. He no longer has any responsibilities to Lavan. But uh, Lavan wants him to stay. Lavan even admits that during the time that Yaakov has been living with him, he's prospered in all sorts of ways, and so Lavan wants Yaakov to remain. But there's really nothing holding him there. One thing is, though, that Yaakov, although he has a family, four wives, 12 children, 11 boys and one girl so far, uh, if he were to leave, he would take very little with him. He's been tending Lavan's flock. And so uh, Lavan says to Yaakov, "Well, what do you want your wages to be in order for you to stay?" And Yaakov makes a suggestion. Uh, he says that uh, every year there will be sheep and goats that are born into the flock that are not that are not white. There will be some that will be banded, that will have a patch around their ankles, or they will have a patch, blotches, or spotted spots, or the brown, or they will be all brown. Yaakov says, let those sheep and goats that have these unusual colors, let them belong to me. First of all, there's a certain small percentage that are always going to be born like this. And second of all, you would always be able to look at the flock and tell which ones are mine. Okay, if you see something in my flock that is not colored that way, then Yaakov says you can consider it as stolen. And uh, yeah, there's a further discussion about removing from the flock as this plan is about to begin, to remove from the flock all of the uh, sheep and goats that currently are in the flock that look this way with bands and spots and patched and brown, so that you're, in a sense, starting with a clean slate. However, there's possibility that Lavan is playing a trick, that he is about to swindle Yaakov out of this agreement. And so Yaakov retaliates. He takes sticks of certain trees, he peels away the bark to expose the white area. Uh, so there are white areas on the sticks. He places these sticks in the area where the sheep and the goats drink water, and they are affected in one way or another by the sticks. How exactly they're affected is not is a subject of some discussion. But the fact is that starting with that year, many of the sheep and the goats that are born have spots and patches and bands and the like. And so Yaakov gains a very large flock. And this happens for several years. We find out later on that this is a period of 6 years during which this happens. And Yaakov can hear that Lavan's family are very jealous of him. And so Yaakov realizes, I've worked for two wives, a total of 14 years. I've worked for 6 years in order to build up my flock so that I can have a beginning of a life to support my family. It's time to go. And the fact is that Hashem speaks to him and commands him to return to Canaan. Now is the time. So Yaakov finds an opportunity to speak with Rachel and Leah out in the field where nobody else will hear. And he says, we've been living here long enough. It is time for me to go back, for me to take the entire family back to Canaan. And he also tells them about a dream that he had. Um, and in that dream, he can see that all of the sheep and the goats that are multiplying are spotted and speckled. Very interesting how this parasha starts off with a dream, and now we have yet another dream towards the latter part of the parasha. But note how drastically Yaakov's dreams have changed. In the opening part of the parasha, he dreams of angels. Now he dreams of sheep and goats. Essentially, he dreams about uh, making money. It's important, but Lavan has had quite an effect on him. It's all the more reason why he needs to go back. And the angel, as much as says this to him in the dream, says, I see what Lavan has done to you. On one level, it means I've seen how Lavan has tried to trick you time and time again, and therefore I've protected you. But it also could be read as, I see how Lavan's worldview has had an effect on you. Rachel and Leah respond that they're prepared to go together with Yaakov, and they freely offer that their own father, Lavan, has really not treated them the way a father should. So they are prepared to go with Yaakov with their husband. And so Yaakov and his family flee. As it happens, Lavan is away. He's involved in shearing his flock, so he's some distance away. And Yaakov uses this opportunity to take his entire family, his wives, his children, everything he owns, and to travel going back towards towards the land of Israel. Before doing so, before leaving, Rachel does something very significant. She steals her father's terafim. Now, what are terafim? Uh, they seem to be some kind of an idol or a totem of some sort. Um, Whether they are actually worshipped or they're used for fortune telling, um, is not that clear. But it is fairly clear that Rachel is not stealing them because she wants them for herself, but because she wants to take them away from her father. Some of the commentaries, Rashi, suggest that she's trying to separate her father from idolatry, and others want to suggest that since the Trafim had the ability to predict, uh, then maybe the Trafim would have been able to tell Lavan where Yaakov and the family had gone. So she's stealing that connection. One way or the other, she steals them. She does not tell anybody that she has stolen them. Yaakov and his family flee. Lavan eventually finds out. He takes his men, no women, no children. He takes the men and he pursues Yaakov. And of course, it takes Lavan much less time to catch up to Yaakov. Yaakov is traveling much more slowly. And they meet at Mount Gilad. Just before Lavan is to confront Yaakov, Hashem appears to Lavan, speaks to Lavan in a dream, and he warns him to be careful what you say to Yaakov. When they finally meet, Lavan confronts Yaakov and says to him, "Why did you steal away? Why did you steal away in the middle of the night, as it were? You didn't give me an opportunity to kiss my daughters and my grandchildren goodbye. And furthermore, why did you steal my terafim? They're very valuable to me, very important to me. Why did you steal them?" And Yaakov admits nothing. He does say that something very fateful, which is that whoever did steal them will not live. Um, Yaakov may think that maybe one of his servants has stolen them and he will punish them severely. But the fact is that Rachel has stolen them, and what a tzaddik says, Hashem fulfills, and this is what ultimately leads to Rachel's premature death, because he decreed that the stealer of the Trafim will not live. Lavan begins a search, tent to tent. He goes everywhere. Is not able to find the Terafim. When he comes up to examining Rachel, he apologizes for not getting off the camel because she is in the way of women, as she says, and that's why she's sitting on the camel. But the fact is that she's hidden the Trafim under the cushion that's on top of the camel on which she's sitting. So Lavan is unable to find the Trafim, and at this point, Yaakov really chastises Lavan for the way that Lavan has treated him. I've been with you for 20 years. I've never been anything but a totally reliable worker, day or night, heat or cold. I took care of your flock faithfully. You never lacked for anything. Didn't have a situation where your flock was attacked by a predator. I took care of everything. And had Hashem not helped me, I would not have survived. Um, and so Lavan says that God spoke to me and warned me. And so Lavan sizes up the situation and says there needs to be a covenant between us, kind of a aggressive treaty, non-aggression treaty, as well as a promise that he's going to treat that Yaakov is going to treat his wives, Lavan's daughters, properly, and even not marry any more wives above and beyond Rachel and Leah. As for the symbol of this covenant, there's a stone that is raised as a pillar, as well as a heap of stones. The heap is an interesting phenomenon because here the Torah tells us what Yaakov calls the heap of stones and what Lavan calls it. Lavan calls it Yagar Sahaduta, which is Aramaic for the heap of witness. Yaakov calls it Gal'ed, which also means a heap or mound of witness, which is kind of a play on the name of the place where this takes place, Gilad, Gal'ed. But you see from this that whereas Lavan used Aramaic, Yaakov continued to use Hebrew. They make a covenant between them. Lavan takes his leave from his daughters, from his grandchildren, and goes back home. The very, very end of the parasha, as Yaakov is making his way towards the land of Israel, he is greeted by a band of malachim, of angels. So the angels in the dream at the beginning of the parasha, in a sense, make a repeat performance here at the end of the parasha, as Yaakov is not entering the land of Israel, but he is about to. He's certainly on the outskirts of the land of Israel. So they welcome him. And Yaakov calls the place where this happens Machanaim, which means two camps, which could be explained as there being it's a meeting place between two camps, a camp of human servants of God and a camp of angels, the heavenly servants of God. And that's the end of the parasha. Now, I thought we would look in a little bit more detail at the following exchange. When Yaakov discovers that he is married not to Rachel as he wanted, but to Leah. Vayiba boker, that it was in the morning, Vihine, he Leah, behold, she is Leah. There was Leah. So Vayomer Lavan, he said to Lavan, Ma zot asitali, what did you do to thee? What is this that you've done to me? Halo berachel avadti imach. Didn't I work with you for Rachel? Velama rimitani, why did you deceive me? Here's Lavan's answer. Vayomer Lavan said, Lo ye'asechen bimkomenu, it will not be done so in our place. Namely, latet hatzeira lifnei habechira, to give the younger one before the older one. You want to marry Rachel? Fine, but Leah has to be married first, so she's married to you as well. But Lavan continues, and he says, Malei shavuazot, literally fill the week of this one, meaning wait until the end of the bridal week, 7 days of celebration for this one, for Leah. V'nitna lecha gam etzot. So v'nitna, which is here, we're going to translate the way it's translated here, and we will give. We will give. And we will give to you also this one in exchange for the work that you work for me for another 7 days, another 7 years. Okay. Now, the word v'nitna grammatically could be analyzed in one of two ways. The translator chose one of them, and it's just the same as Rashi translated. V'nitna l'shon rabim, it's plural, first person plural. In other words, it means we will give. And if you're paying close attention, if it means we will give, then the hey at the end of the word v'nitna seems to be extra. But Rashi points out that sometimes happens with future tense verbs, and he gives some examples. V'nisrafa, unvala. So this too is an expression of v'nitain, which would mean and we will give. What Rashi doesn't explain is who's the we. who is the we that will give uh, Rachel to Yaakov to marry? After all, she is Lavan's daughter. Is Lavan speaking of himself in the royal we? Possibly. Rashi doesn't explain why. He just says that that it means we will give. The truth is that there are some other commentaries that analyze it differently. Uh, Instead of translating it as "and we will give," it's analyzed as a passive verb, and it's feminine. So it would translate as "she will be given." She, meaning Rachel, will be given. It's interesting that from time to time, one word can have more than one possible, let's call it grammatical analysis. And there are other Mefarshim that read it this way, such as the Rashbam, Rashi's grandson. And we could have left it at that. Does it mean "and we will give," or does it mean "and she will be given"? But the Ramban says that Lavan's choice of words is indicative of a certain element of his character. After he cites the opinion of Rashi as well as the Ibn Ezra, he says the following: "V'hanachon be'inai," that which is correct in my eyes, ki divrei Lavan be'orma, the words of Lavan were with guile. He was being sneaky. Amar Yaakov, he said to Yaakov, "Lo yaseh ken bimkomenu." Such a thing is not done in our place, meaning to allow the younger daughter to marry before the older one. Why not? Ki lo yanichuni anshe hamakom, because the people of the place will not let me la'asot ken, to do so. Ki nevalahi be'etzlam, because it's a disgrace. It violates their conventions. So what, according to the Ramban, what Lavan is saying is, we will give. I do not make these decisions in a vacuum. It's not purely my decision whether or not to give Rachel to you as a wife. I'm part of a larger group. I'm part of a society that has its standards. It's entirely possible that what the Ramban means is the way that Nechama Leibowitz explains the Ramban. Nechama Leibowitz, a beautiful essay on this parasha, says that Lavan is essentially excusing his behavior by saying, really, if it were up to me, I would have done so. But I'm part of something bigger. I'm part of a society, and I can't take responsibility for myself. The society decides. Here's the way Nechama Leibowitz characterizes Lavan's way of speaking here. One of the characteristic signs of a wicked man standing in the way of reformation, unable to improve, is the flight from personal responsibility. Notice he's not saying it's not my fault. It's the community, it's the committee, it's the whatever the group might be. He regards himself as forced into it because the community or some vague body, it could be anything, it could be a corporation, it could be an army, it could be anything. The community or some vague body to which he belongs compelled him to act thus. Lavan is taking refuge in the argument of being a small cog in a machine. But that shows moral weakness. Lavan is it as much as hinting that he would do differently if it were up to him, but he feels he has no choice. But of course, it was his decision. It certainly was his decision not to tell Yaakov that Leah needs to get married first. But Lavan is presenting himself as a cog in a small machine, but that, as the Nechama Leibowitz has pointed out, based on the Ramban, is a sign of moral weakness. Well, this brings us to an end of our analysis of Parashat Vayetze. I thank you all very much for joining me. I look forward to being with you again in the future. This is Rabbi Abraham Fisher for Parsha Highlights and Insights saying Shalom.